to the House.
The question is that the motion be agreed to.
Mr. Speaker.
Chris Farfoy.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much for giving me the chance to speak in this third reading. The previous stage, the committee stage, I think we could best be described as unbalanced. Unbalanced because not one member opposite took a call in the committee stage. Such a priority for this government, as the Minister said in the first stage, but not one contribution from the other side of the House. Actually, to be fair, there were two contributions, point of order from the junior whip, and Maggie Barry actually answered a question for her, for the Speaker and the Chair. So, you know, if this government thinks that this is a priority, then we thought we might have... Then it might have been, Mr. Speaker, it might have been good for them to take a few more calls, or a call, in the committee stage. Mr. Speaker, I feel sorry for the members opposite who didn't know that this measure was coming in the budget. It's going to be a very long plane ride home, or a drive in the car, because those members opposite know they're going to have to go home to their local electorates, if they've got one, or to their piece of New Zealand, and explain this to the people in their electorate. And Maggie Barry's got quite a few rest homes in her electorate, so she can consider herself to be very, very busy soon, having to explain the measures that are contained in this bill, which will adversely affect quite a number of people, I'd say, quite a number of the older people in her electorate, and I'm sure the families of those concerned in the North Shore will make their opinions known to her, so her phone and the electorate office of Maggie Barry MP will be going off the hook. Off the hook. Now, because as she explained to us, she didn't know this was going to happen at election time. This is a new initiative from the government, so I feel sorry for all the members at the back of the House and the National Party who are going to have to go home at the end of this urgency and say, what the hell happened there? What the hell happened there? Because they've got to go home and explain this rubbish piece of legislation which was brought in sneakily into this House. Mr. Speaker, this has been sneakily put through this House. It wasn't mentioned once, as I've been saying this ad nauseum today. It wasn't mentioned once in the Finance Minister's speech, not once. And how were the people of New Zealand notified about this measure, this piece of legislation? 1.5 sentences in a throwaway line in Tony Roll's health budget press release. Shocking, appalling process. This is the way that the government announces what Paula Bennett called a priority. So, Mr. Speaker, I will give her credit for that. Mr. Speaker, the other travesty here in this process is that this is being rushed through under urgency. In the first year of this measure being introduced, 170 elderly Kiwis who are currently going to be in rest home care are going to be affected. So that's 170 families out there, and probably more, that are going to be very concerned about what is happening in this House today. Because it is just a start, because I believe, if Ms King could advise me about the fourth year, I believe it's 640 individuals that will be affected in the fourth year. So over the next 2 or 3 years, there are going to be even more families affected by this. Those families, Mr. Speaker, are not going to get the opportunity to take their concerns to this House. They're not going to be able to come and say, I'm unhappy, or I'm indifferent, or have you thought about this? Have you considered that? How much money is it going to save? We can answer a few of those questions now, because the Ministry of Health have quite helpfully given us some numbers in the regulatory impact statement. $4.5 million saved in the first year, and I believe in the fourth year it gets up to $16.5 million in a measure that someone earlier from the other side of the House, and I think it was Tim McIndoe, said was a measure to ensure the sustainability of residential aged care in New Zealand, to save $46 million. Well, if this government thinks saving $46 million in the 46 I think in total, if this government thinks saving $46 million is the answer to sorting out residential aged care in New Zealand, Mr. Speaker, it's got some problems. Mr. Speaker, during the committee stage, many people on this side of the House did mention the silence of the Minister who was in the chair. And I think, to be fair, one member of the National Party did answer a question, even though she got herself into a bit of grief with the whip. But the silence from the chair, Mr Speaker, just shows you the tactics that the government has employed to bring this piece of legislation through. It wants to sweep it through this House as fast as possible so nobody outside of this House realises what's going on. And that could be put in the category, I believe, Mr Speaker, as dodgy process. Those people outside of this House who are worried about this, and as Annette King said, Grey Power is watching, wanted to hear from the Minister as to why this is being brought in, as to what the rationale of it is, and how much money it's going to save, and why weren't they consulted about this earlier on. And none of those questions were answered at all, Mr Speaker, apart from the response that we got from Maggie Barry to say that they didn't know about this before the election. Well, I'm sorry, Mr Speaker. I'm sorry about this, Mr Speaker. I'm sorry about this, Mr Speaker, but that's just not good enough when serious questions are being asked, especially when this House doesn't get the opportunity at Select Committee to let other people answer questions. So we're here asking the Minister in the chair questions and not a peep out of the Minister, Mr Speaker, and I think that's a shame given what I think are large ramifications of this bill to elderly people around the country. Mr Speaker, this is a serious issue about how we look after our elderly. It's an issue that I think personally needs the heads of this whole Parliament to get around a table and sort out. It needs a broad, cooperative approach to make sure that our loved ones, and I'm sure we've all got people who are in this House who we hold dear, who are around this age, are looked after properly. And if some of those people can't afford care, then how we provide that for them, and some who can, how do we make sure that they are looked after as well in a way that isn't overly burdensome to them. But it's an issue that needs a proper debate, a broad debate about all the issues that are concerned in aged care, not a piece of flimsy, rushed in through the House, last-minute legislation that the government would prefer to be swept through this House very, very quickly. Mr Speaker, this is a piece of legislation that unfortunately has gone through this House under urgency. It didn't deserve that. This issue is bigger than this. It shouldn't have been swept through under urgency. People should have been able to have their say. And as I said in my committee stage speech, Mr Speaker, around the silence of the Minister and the Chair when we were putting, I think, some of them are reasonable and some of them I think may have had a slight political edge to them, the questions that we put to the Minister, but the silence is golden, Mr Speaker, and I think that shows you that I think that shows the level of respect that this government, through this process, with this bill, has shown the elderly people of New Zealand.
Honourable Tony Ryle.